In 1966, Canadian Domina Jalbert was granted a patent for a multi-cell wing-type aerial device, a wing having a flexible canopy constituting an upper skin and with a plurality of longitudinally extending ribs forming in effect a wing corresponding to an airplane wing airfoil. More particularly, the invention contemplates the provision of a wing of rectangular or other shape having a canopy or top skin and a lower spaced apart bottom skin, a governable gliding parachute with multi-cells and controls for glide. In 1954, Walter Newmark predicted, in an article in Flight magazine, a time when a glider pilot would be able to launch himself by running over the edge of a cliff or down a slope, whether on a rock climbing holiday in Skye or skiing in the Alps. In 1961, the French engineer Pierre Lemongin produced improved parachute designs that led to the Paracommander. The Paracommander had cutouts at the rear and sides that enabled it to be towed into the air and steered, leading to parasailing, parascending. Domina Jalbert invented the parafoil, which had sectioned cells in an aerofoil shape, an open leading edge and a closed trailing edge, inflated by passage through the air, the ram air design. He filed U.S. Patent 3,131,894 on January 10, 1963. About that time, David Barish was developing the sail wing, single-surface wing, for recovery of NASA space capsules. Slope soaring was a way of testing out the sail wing. After tests on Hunter Mountain, New York, in September 1965, he went on to promote slope soaring as a summer activity for ski resorts. Author Walter Newmark wrote operating procedures for ascending parachutes, and in 1973 he and a group of enthusiasts with a passion for tow-launching PCs and ram air parachutes broke away from the British Parachute Association to form the British Association of Parascending Clubs, which later became the British Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association. In 1997, Newmark was awarded the Gold Medal of the Royal Aero Club of the UK. Authors Patrick Gilligan, Canada, and Bertrand Dubuis, Switzerland, wrote the first flight manual, the Paragliding Manual, in 1985, coining the word paragliding. These developments were combined in June 1978 by three friends, Jean-Claude Bétamps, André Beaune and Gérard Besson, from Moussy, Haute-Savoie, France. After inspiration from an article on slope soaring in the Parachute Manual magazine by parachutist and publisher Dan Pointer, they calculated that on a suitable slope, a square ram air parachute could be inflated by running down the slope. Bétamps launched from Pointe du Pertuiset, Moussy, and flew 100 meters. Beaune followed him and glided down to the football pitch in the valley 1,000 meters below. Parapente, paint being French for slope, was born. From the 1980s, equipment has continued to improve, and the number of paragliding pilots and established sites has continued to increase. The first unofficial paragliding world championship was held in Verbier, Switzerland, in 1987, though the first officially sanctioned FAI World Paragliding Championship was held in Kösen, Austria, in 1989. Europe has seen the greatest growth in paragliding, with France alone registering in 2011 over 25,000 active pilots. In 2022, feasibility study of paragliding from above 8,000 meters is in progress in Nepal in the Everest region. It would be the paragliding from highest altitude in the world. Paragliding is the recreational and competitive adventure sport of flying paragliders. Lightweight, free-flying, foot-launched glider aircraft with no rigid primary structure. The pilot sits in a harness or lies supine in a cocoon-like pod, suspended below a fabric wing. Wing shape is maintained by the suspension lines, the pressure of air entering vents in the front of the wing, and the aerodynamic forces of the air flowing over the outside. Despite not using an engine, paraglider flights can last many hours and cover many hundreds of kilometers, though flights of 1 to 2 hours and covering some tens of kilometers are more the norm. By skillful exploitation of sources of lift, the pilot may gain height, often climbing to altitudes of a few thousand meters. The paraglider wing or canopy is usually what is known in engineering as a ram air airfoil. Such wings comprise two layers of fabric that are connected to internal supporting material in such a way as to form a row of cells. By leaving most of the cells open only at the leading edge, incoming air keeps the wing inflated, thus maintaining its shape. When inflated, the wing's cross-section has the typical teardrop aerofoil shape. Modern paraglider wings are made of high-performance non-porous materials such as ripstop polyester or nylon fabric. In some modern paragliders, from the 1990s onwards, especially higher performance wings, some of the cells of the leading edge are closed to form a cleaner aerodynamic profile. Holes in the internal ribs allow a free flow of air from the open cells to these closed cells to inflate them, and also to the wingtips, which are also closed. Shark nose is a design of the leading edge which is meant to increase wing stability and stall resistance. For storage and carrying, the wing is usually folded into a stuff sack, bag, which can then be stowed in a large backpack along with the harness. For pilots who may not want the added weight or fuss of a backpack, some modern harnesses include the ability to turn the harness inside out such that it becomes a backpack. Paragliders are unique among human-carrying aircraft in being easily portable. The complete equipment packs into a rucksack and can be carried easily on the pilot's back, in a car, or on public transport. In comparison with other air sports, this substantially simplifies travel to a suitable takeoff spot, the selection of a landing place and return travel. Tandem paragliders, designed to carry the pilot and one passenger, are larger but otherwise similar. They usually fly faster with higher trim speeds, are more resistant to collapse, and have a slightly higher sink rate compared to solo paragliders. The pilot is loosely and comfortably buckled into a harness, which offers support in both the standing and sitting positions. Most harnesses have foam or airbag protectors underneath the seat and behind the back to reduce the impact on failed launches or landings. Modern harnesses are designed to be as comfortable as a lounge chair in the sitting or reclining position. Many harnesses even have an adjustable lumbar support. A reserve parachute is also typically connected to a paragliding harness. Most pilots use variometers, radios, and, increasingly, GNSS units when they are flying. The main purpose of a variometer is in helping a pilot find and stay in the core of a thermal to maximize height gain and, conversely, to indicate when a pilot is in sinking air and needs to find rising air. Humans can sense the acceleration when they first hit a thermal, but cannot detect the difference between constant rising air and constant sinking air. Modern variometers are capable of detecting rates of climb or sink of 1 centimeter per second. A variometer indicates climb rate, or sink rate, with short audio signals beeps, which increase in pitch and tempo during ascent, and a droning sound, which gets deeper as the rate of descent increases, and/or a visual display. It also shows altitude, either above takeoff, above sea level, or, at higher altitudes, flight level. Radio communications are used in training, to communicate with other pilots, and to report where and when they intend to land. These radios normally operate on a range of frequencies in different countries, some authorized, some illegal but tolerated locally. Some local authorities, e.g., flight clubs, offer periodic automated weather updates on these frequencies. In rare cases, pilots use radios to talk to airport control towers or air traffic controllers. Many pilots carry a cell phone so they can call for pickup should they land away from their intended point of destination. GNSS is a necessary accessory when flying competitions, where it has to be demonstrated that waypoints have been correctly passed. The recorded GNSS track of a flight can be used to analyze flying technique or can be shared with other pilots. GNSS is also used to determine drift due to the prevailing wind when flying at altitude, providing position information to allow restricted airspace to be avoided and identifying one's location for retrieval teams after landing out in unfamiliar territory. GNSS is integrated with some models of variometer. This is not only more convenient, but also allows for a three-dimensional record of the flight. The flight track can be used as proof for record claims, replacing the old method of photo documentation. Increasingly, smartphones are used as the primary means of navigation and flight logging, with several applications available to assist in air navigation. They are also used to coordinate tasks in competitive paragliding and facilitate retrieval of pilots returning to their point of launch. External variometers are typically used to assist in accurate altitude information. Paraglider ground handling, also known as kiting, is the practice of handling the paraglider on land. The primary purpose of ground handling is to practice the skills necessary for launching and landing. However, ground handling could be considered a fun and challenging sport in and of itself. Ground handling is considered an essential part of most paragliding wing management training. It needs to be remembered that in any sort of stumble or tumble, the head is at risk and a helmet is therefore always advisable. It is highly recommended that low-hour pilots, ground handling, should be wearing a formal harness with leg and waist straps firmly fitted and fastened. Since 2015, the standard harness has become an inflatable type. This forms a protective cushion when, during flight, air is forced through a check valve and retained in a chamber behind and under the pilot. In ground handling practice, the amount of air passing through the check valve may be very slight. In an accident where the pilot has been lifted and dumped while facing downwind, the protection offered by an inflatable harness is likely to be minimal. The old-fashioned foam type of harness has a special value in that sort of situation. As with all aircraft, launching and landing are done into wind. The wing is placed into an airstream, either by running or being pulled, or an existing wind. The wing moves up over the pilot into a position in which it can carry the passenger. The pilot is then lifted from the ground and, after a safety period, can sit down into his harness. Unlike skydivers, paragliders, like hang gliders, do not jump at any time during this process. In low winds, the wing is inflated with a forward launch, where the pilot runs forward with the wing behind so that the air pressure generated by the forward movement inflates the wing. It is often easier, because the pilot only has to run forward, but the pilot cannot see his wing until it is above him, where he has to check it in a very short time for correct inflation and untangled lines before the launch. In higher winds, a reverse launch is used, with the pilot facing the wing to bring it up into a flying position, then turning around under the wing and running to complete the launch. Reverse launches have a number of advantages over a forward launch. It is more straightforward to inspect the wing and check if the lines are free as it leaves the ground. In the presence of wind, the pilot can be tugged toward the wing, and facing the wing makes it easier to resist this force and safer in case the pilot slips, as opposed to being dragged backwards. However, the movement pattern is more complex than forward launch, and the pilot has to hold the brakes in a correct way and turn to the correct side so he does not tangle the lines. These launches are normally attempted with a reasonable wind speed, making the ground speed required to pressurize the wing much lower. The launch is initiated by the hands raising the leading edge with the as. As it rises, the wing is controlled more by centering the feet than by use of the brakes or Cs. With mid-level wings NC and D, the wing may try to overshoot the pilot as it nears the top. This is checked with Cs or brakes. The wing becomes increasingly sensitive to the Cs and brakes as its internal air pressure rises. This is usually felt from increasing lift of the wing applying harness pressure to the seat of the pants. That pressure indicates that the wing is likely to remain stable when the pilot pirouettes to face the wind. The next step in the launch is to bring the wing into the lift zone. There are two techniques for accomplishing this depending on wind conditions. In light wind, this is usually done after turning to the front, steering with the feet towards the low wing tip, and applying light brakes in a natural sense to keep the wing horizontal. In stronger wind conditions, it is often found to be easier to remain facing downwind while moving slowly and steadily backwards into the wind. Knees bent to load the wing, foot adjustments to remain central, and minimum use of Cs or brakes to keep the wing horizontal. Pirouette when the feet are close to lifting. This option has two distinct advantages. The pilot can see the wing center marker, and aid to centering the feet, and, if necessary, B, the pilot can move briskly towards the wing to assist with an emergency deflation. With either method, it is essential to check traffic across the launch face before committing to flight. The A's and C's technique described above is well suited to low hours pilots, on standard wings, in wind strengths up to 10 knots. It is particularly recommended for kiting. As wind speed increases above 10 knots, especially on steep ridges, the use of the Cs introduces the potential to be lifted before the wing is overhead due to the increased angle of attack. That type of premature lift often results in the pilot's weight swinging downwind rapidly, resulting in a frontal tuck due to excess align loads. In that situation, the pilot commonly drops vertically and injuries are not uncommon. In ridge soaring situations above 10 knots, it is almost always better to lift the wing with A's only and use the brakes to stop any potential overshoot. The brakes do not usually increase the angle of attack as much Cs. As wind strength increases, it becomes more important than ever for the pilot to keep the wing loaded by bending the knees and pushing the shoulders forward. Most pilots will find that when their hands are vertically under the brake line pulleys, they are able to reduce trailing edge drag to the absolute minimum. That is not so easy for most, when the arms are thrust rearwards. In flatter countryside, pilots can also be launched with a tow. Once at full height, towing can launch pilots up to 3,000 feet altitude. The pilot pulls a release cord, and the towline falls away. This requires separate training, as flying on a winch has quite different characteristics from free flying. There are two major ways to tow: pay-in and pay-out towing. Pay-in towing involves a stationary winch that winds in the towline and thereby pulls the pilot in the air. The distance between winch and pilot at the start is around 500 meters or more. Pay-out towing involves a moving object, like a car or a boat, that pays out line slower than the speed of the object, thereby pulling the pilot up in the air. In both cases, it is very important to have a gauge indicating line tension to avoid pulling the pilot out of the air. Another form of towing is static line towing. This involves a moving object, like a car or a boat, attached to a paraglider or hang glider with a fixed length line. This can be very dangerous, because now the forces on the line have to be controlled by the moving object itself, which is almost impossible to do, unless stretchy rope and a pressure tension meter dynamometer is used. Static line towing with stretchy rope and a load cell as a tension meter has been used in Poland, Ukraine, Russia, and other Eastern European countries for over 20 years, under the name Malinka, with about the same safety record as other forms of towing. One more form of towing is hand towing. This is where 1 to 3 people pull a paraglider using a tow rope of up to 500 feet. The stronger the wind, the fewer people are needed for a successful hand tow. Tows up to 300 feet have been accomplished, allowing the pilot to get into a lift band of a nearby ridge or row of buildings and ridge soar in the lift the same way as with a regular foot launch. Landing a paraglider, as with all unpowered aircraft which cannot abort a landing, involves some specific techniques and traffic patterns. Paragliding pilots most commonly lose their height by flying a figure 8 over a landing zone until they reach the correct height, then line up into the wind and give the glider full speed. Once the correct height, about a meter above ground, is achieved, the pilot will stall the glider in order to land. Unlike during launch, where coordination between multiple pilots is straightforward, landing involves more planning, because more than one pilot might have to land at the same time. Therefore, a specific traffic pattern has been established. Pilots line up into a position above the airfield and to the side of the landing area, which is dependent on the wind direction, where they can lose height, if necessary, by flying circles. From this position, they follow the legs of a flight path in a rectangular pattern to the landing zone, downwind leg, base leg, and final approach. This allows for synchronization between multiple pilots and reduces the risk of collisions, because a pilot can anticipate what other pilots around him are going to do next. Paragliding, like any extreme sport, is a potentially dangerous activity. In the United States, for example, in 2010, the last year for which details are available, one paraglider pilot died. This is an equivalent rate of 1 in 5,000 pilots. In 2019, YouTube personality Grant Thompson of the King of Random died in a paraglider accident. Over the years 1994 to 2010, an average of 7 in every 10,000 active paraglider pilots have been fatally injured, though with a marked improvement in recent years. In France, with over 25,000 registered flyers, 2 of every 10,000 pilots were fatally injured in 2011, a rate that is not atypical of the years 2007 to 2011, although around 6 of every 1,000 pilots were seriously injured, more than 2-day hospital stay. The potential for injury can be significantly reduced by training and risk management. The use of proper equipment such as a wing designed for the pilot's size and skill level, as well as a helmet, a reserve parachute, and a cushioned harness also minimize risk. Pilot safety is influenced by an understanding of the site conditions such as air turbulence, rotors, strong thermals, gusty wind, and ground obstacles such as power lines. Sufficient pilot training in wing control and emergency maneuvers from competent instructors can minimize accidents. Many paragliding accidents are the result of a combination of pilot error and poor flying conditions. SIV, short for Simulation d'Incident en Volume, Simulation of Incident in Flight, instruction offers training in managing and preventing unstable and potentially dangerous situations such as collapses, full stalls, and cravats. These courses are typically led by a specially trained instructor over large bodies of water, with the student usually being instructed via radio. Students will be taught how to induce dangerous situations, and thus learn how to both avoid and remedy them once induced. This course is recommended to pilots who are looking to move to more high performance and less stable wings, which is a natural progression for most pilots. In some countries, a SIV course is a basic requirement of initial pilot training. In the event of an unrecoverable maneuver resulting in water landing, a rescue boat is typically dispatched to collect the pilot. Other added safety features may include buoyancy aids or secondary reserve parachutes. These courses are not considered essential for novice-level flying. There are several key components to a paragliding pilot certification instruction program. Initial training for beginning pilots usually begins with some amount of ground school to discuss the basics, including elementary theories of flight as well as basic structure and operation of the paraglider. Students then learn how to control the glider on the ground, practicing takeoffs and controlling the wing, overhead. Low, gentle hills are next where students get their first short flights, flying at very low altitudes, to get used to the handling of the wing over varied terrain. Special winches can be used to tow the glider to low altitude in areas that have no hills readily available. As their skills progress, students move onto steeper, higher hills, or higher winch tows, making longer flights, and learning to turn the glider, control the glider's speed, then moving on to 360 degrees turns, spot landings, big ears, used to increase the rate of descent for the paraglider, and other more advanced techniques. Training instructions are often provided to the student via radio, particularly during the first flights. A third key component to a complete paragliding instructional program provides substantial background in the key areas of meteorology, aviation law, and general flight area etiquette. To give prospective pilots a chance to determine if they would like to proceed with a full pilot training program, most schools offer tandem flights, in which an experienced instructor pilots the paraglider with the prospective pilot as a passenger. Schools often offer pilots' families and friends the opportunity to fly tandem, and sometimes sell tandem pleasure flights at holiday resorts. Most recognized courses lead to a national license and an internationally recognized International Pilot Proficiency Information Identification Card. The IPI specifies 5 stages of paragliding proficiency, from the entry-level Parapro 1 to the most advanced Stage 5. Attaining a level of Parapro 3 typically allows the pilot to fly solo or without instructor supervision.